Well, Sasol shareholders will be asked to vote in the sale of a 50% stake of its base chemicals operation at Lake Charles in the US to LyondellBasell. The $2 billion it will receive will go towards paying down debt that's built up as a result of the Lake Charles project. Joining with more is Theo Botha. He is shareholder activist from Proxy. Theo, Sasol appears to be in a corner. Was this a forced sale?
I think in a way you can say it was a forced sale, but you also have to say, why is it a forced sale? I think the main problem is that their balance sheet is under significant pressure. The second problem is the Brent oil price has actually collapsed. And the third problem would be your huge cost overruns on the CapEx expenditure on Lake Charles, which is now accumulated into the issue where the company has now come out saying we need to sell certain divisions within the group.
Well, shareholders are being asked to approve the transaction. They weren't asked to approve the initial investment in Lake Charles, which has ballooned from $8.9 billion to $12.8 billion. Why is that?
Yeah, so initially in 2014 or 2013, when they started the project, I asked them this question at one of the AGMs, and they basically said to me, well, at that stage, their market price was X in terms of their market cap, and therefore they didn't have to actually get approval from the shareholders because it was a smaller, as a percentage, they didn't have to actually get approval. I felt at that time that they should get approval because we see with large CapEx projects overruns. And therefore, as soon as there are overruns, that has an impact on the internal rate of return. So at that time, I specifically raised the issue, and they sort of allayed my fears in the sense of saying, well, we didn't have to get it.
It's been an ongoing issue, though, Theo, the cost overruns. What have shareholders been saying to Sasol, and how has it addressed these concerns?
So at the 2014 AGM, when they had their first cost overrun, I drew to the attention of these cost overruns. And management basically said, well, we've put in certain checks and balances in place in terms of strengthening internal controls and obviously maybe getting the audit committee more involved in the whole process. But at that AGM, they said, well, hang on, this is what we are doing to rectify it. And also, they documented that in the minutes of those meetings. So leaving that AGM, shareholders are under the impression of saying, okay, shucks, on the first cost overrun, we've addressed it. But they didn't address it because in 2019, we had a director, Peter Robertson, who actually said, well, shucks, I think there was a sense of failure in these cost overruns. He was the only non-executive director who actually sort of said, well, I think I have failed in my duties in terms of actually holding companies, in terms of holding the exco to account. Whereas your chairman of the audit committee and the CFO actually didn't accept any responsibility for these cost overruns over a long period of time.
Are your concerns shared by other shareholders, Theo?
Well, I think you can look at the concerns as regards other shareholders by looking at the share price. The share price went down quite substantially, and shareholders obviously started selling, and that shows their concerns. But I would like to see shareholders expressing themselves at the AGM in terms of looking at the voting for non-executive directors and executive directors and saying, well, are we confident in terms of this? Are we happy with these directors? And if they're not happy with the directors or their performance thereof, they should then vote against them. So shareholders, being asset owners and asset managers, need to act in a more responsible manner by showing how they vote at these specific AGMs.
And the share price hasn't responded positively to the latest announcement of the sale to LyondellBasell. Do you think that's indicative of a bad price, the $2 billion that's on the table?
So it's very difficult to get an understanding of the $2 billion because basically what they're doing is they're selling the base chemical business. They're selling 50% of that and a portion of the property at Lake Charles in regards to that. So it's not like they're selling the whole project. It's just a portion of it. So you would probably ask me, well, is that a fair price or not? It's almost impossible to see whether it's a fair price or not until such time as they release the circular. Hopefully the circular will be in a detailed format so shareholders can make an informed decision as regards whether are they getting good value or not. I think at the end of the day, they're probably not getting good value. They need to strengthen the balance sheet, and they'll probably have to come to the market and raise another $2 billion through the share issue.
Mm. Do shareholders have any choice not to approve the transaction given the debt situation at Sasol?
I think that shareholders always have a choice in regard whether to approve it or not approve it. The main issue here is what is put forward in a circular, and does that make sense in terms of their arguments for that or against it. They will obviously argue for, we think this is a good price, but if they give us all the facts, then the shareholders can make up their opinion. We certainly don't want to see a situation whereby we're selling a portion of the business at a ridiculous price. What shareholders would like to see is they would like to see that we're selling it at a fair and reasonable price, and that there's a potential upside in this transaction, and maybe the incumbents coming in might have a certain skill set that Sasol don't have.
Theo, at the end of the day, value has been destroyed in the company. Who's been held accountable for this? We know that the former joint CEOs left last year. There's a new CEO under Fleetwood Grobler. Has there been enough accountability for this?
I don't see much accountability. You know, we see CEOs, the first CEO who actually got us into this project being Constable, also left, didn't finish his term. And then we got the two new CEOs, being Stephen and Mugani, who came in, and they've also left. You don't really see accountability. You know, people just leave and say, well, okay, they've left because maybe this or that. But where should we see accountability? I tell you where we should see accountability. We should see accountability when we claw back the short-term bonuses and claw back the long-term bonuses. So if these directors have earned bonuses over a period of time, for example, the last two directors would have probably earned the bonuses over the period of this project, we should see a corresponding clawback of those bonuses that they earn, which related to this project, because quite clearly the overruns on the CapEx was absolutely a serious flaw in terms of them putting that project forward. And there was a serious flaw in terms of not holding management to account who was supposed to have produced the project on time and within a budget.
Theo, your confidence in the company's future Sasol strategy under current CEO Fleetwood Grobler?
Well, I think Fleetwood Grobler basically has spent all his time at Sasol, so he should have a great intellectual capital and he should have a good understanding of the various business units within the group. But what we should always be wary of is when companies start appointing overseas CEOs. So, you know, this CapEx project arrived because Constable obviously thought this was a good idea, and then obviously put it forward to management, put it forward to the board, got a sound off on that, and then left before the project was finished. So Sasol has never ever appointed an overseas director barring Constable. So hopefully we're getting into a situation whereby we are appointing from within, which I think is always where you should be, and therefore you're appointing people with a relevant skill set. So let's hope that he can actually then re-guide this ship.
Yeah, we have to leave it there. I'm sure we have more conversations in the future, but thanks for speaking to us today.
Super. Thank you so much, Stephen.